Hello and welcome to Strat&Talk, the Descartes Mauss podcast. At Descartes Mauss, we help companies turn complexity into clarity. Our AI-powered strategy platform enables leaders to make faster, smarter decisions. It does this by combining data-driven foresight with business intuition. So whether that's identifying growth opportunities, anticipating market shifts, or maybe aligning teams around long-term priorities, our tech is really built to support organizations navigating change. I'm part of the team here, and today I'm joined by our Consumer and Market Insights Manager. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's great to join you for this deep dive.
So we've been really, digging into an idea lately, one that goes beyond the usual understanding of resilience. For a lot of companies, resilience is, well, it's something you hope you have when disaster strikes, isn't it? It's about survival, bouncing back after a shock hits. It feels, well, reactive, like putting up a shield when trouble appears.
All right, that's the common view.
But what if we flip that completely? What if resilience wasn't just about enduring, but about being inherently built to move forward, stronger and smarter through constant change?
Oh, okay.
That shift in perspective from, let's say, bouncing back to actually moving forward through disruption, that's really what we want to explore today.
Yeah, and that traditional view you mentioned, resilience is just absorbing the punches, surviving the storm. It's definitely important. You absolutely need that capacity to withstand shocks, no question.
Sure, you have to survive first.
But if that's all you have, you're basically just waiting on the sidelines for the storm to pass. And in today's business climate, disruption isn't some rare event anymore, is it? It's kind of the baseline.
It feels constant.
Exactly. So if you're just standing still, absorbing, while your market, your competitors are constantly evolving, you're falling behind.
So that old model of resilience, while it might be necessary for survival, it actually leaves you vulnerable, especially in a world where the ground is always shifting under your feet.
Precisely. Waiting to recover feels like a luxury most businesses just can't afford anymore.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's why this proactive resilience isn't just some defensive thing. It's actually a competitive engine. When disruption hits, companies with this proactive mindset, they don't just stop and hunker down. They keep their momentum going.
They keep moving.
They're built to spot opportunities within the chaos, to adapt their operations faster, make decisions while others are still trying to figure out what even happened. That ability to keep executing, keep growing when everyone else is hitting the brakes, that's where you find real, transformative, competitive advantage.
So it's less about weathering the storm and more about learning to sail faster, more effectively, because you actually understand the wind and waves better.
That's a great way to put it. It's a fundamental shift from reactive to proactive. It's the capacity not just to recover after things stabilize, but to actively reconfigure your strategy, your operations, maybe even your structure in real time as the environment is changing around you. And we see this, right, with companies that don't just survive major market shifts. They actually use them as catalysts. They gain ground. They move with clarity, with purpose, when uncertainty is at its highest.
Okay, so if we accept this idea of resilience as this proactive growth-driving force, something you actively build, what are the core elements? What does this proactive capacity actually look like day to day?
Well, based on our analysis and, working with clients, we see three key pillars. These tend to distinguish the truly resilient, growth-oriented organizations. Think of them as the essential capacities you need: agility, decisiveness, and structural flexibility.
All right, let's break those down because, these terms get thrown around a lot, right? But it's how that really matters.
Yeah.
So pillar one, agility. Everyone wants to be agile, but how do you bake that in so it's a constant state, not just some scramble during a crisis?
Yeah, that's the critical part. Agility is fundamentally about preparation. It's not pure improvisation. You can't just suddenly invent agility when you need it most.
Right, it's too late then.
Exactly. The companies that showed incredible speed and flexibility during, say, recent global disruptions, often they weren't just making it up as they went along. They had already invested in the underlying capabilities that enable that rapid response.
Such as?
Things like robust predictive capabilities, systems designed specifically to detect weak signals early on.
Weak signals. Okay, like spotting a tiny ripple on the horizon before it becomes a tidal wave. Is that the idea?
That's exactly it. It could be anything, really. Subtle shifts in consumer search behavior, maybe, or changes in supplier chatter you see on forums, or even anomalies in global shipping data that just don't fit the normal patterns. Investing in systems that constantly monitor for these unusual patterns, it gives you a heads up, a whisper of change, long before it's obvious to everyone else. It's about buying time.
But, okay, getting the signal is one thing. Acting on it is another beast altogether, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you make sure the organization can actually move quickly once a signal is detected?
That's where empowerment comes in. It's crucial. Agility only becomes a real systemic strength, truly embedded, if decision makers right across the organization have both access to those early insights and the authority, the permission, to act quickly based on them.
So avoiding the bottleneck at the top.
Absolutely. If every single decision needs to go up, 7 layers of management, you lose all the advantage you gained by spotting the signal early. Agility needs to be decentralized, at least to some extent. And very important here is also building comfort with operating in ambiguity.
That's tough.
It is. You rarely have perfect information when you first detect a weak signal or see a change starting. You need to build that organizational muscle, the ability to make informed decisions, take meaningful steps forward, even with imperfect data. Hesitation is the enemy here.
So move, learn, adjust, rather than wait for 100% certainty that might never come. That makes a lot of sense. You need the info early, but also the structure and the culture that lets people use it without, fear of being wrong if things aren't perfectly clear yet. Which kind of leads us nicely into pillar 2, decisiveness. How do technologies like AI and data analytics help enable this kind of proactive decisiveness, especially when everything feels uncertain?
Well, in uncertain times, the biggest challenge often isn't a lack of data. It's usually the opposite. You're drowning in too much data, too much noise.
Right. Information overload.
Exactly. Conflicting reports, different expert opinions, internal pressures pulling in different directions. AI is incredibly valuable here because it can cut through that noise. It can process just vast amounts of information, identify the underlying patterns, and highlight the signals that are truly significant, the ones that actually deserve attention.
So it helps you see the signal through the noise, basically.
That's it. It brings clarity when things feel chaotic. Think about a company like Colgate-Palmolive. They've talked about using data-driven foresight. And it's not just for those huge, once-a-decade strategic shifts. They're integrating data and AI to guide everyday decisions.
Like what, for example?
Things like optimizing pricing in specific regions based on real-time demand shifts they're seeing, or adjusting inventory levels based on very localized trend predictions. That's not reacting after sales drop. That's actively shaping outcomes by making smarter, faster decisions based on what the data is telling you right now.
Okay, so that really shifts decisiveness. It's not reactive crisis management anymore. It's more like proactive pathway shaping.
Yeah.
You're choosing the route.
Absolutely. And it builds confidence, too. When your decisions are informed by robust data analysis, by AI-powered insights, you just have greater confidence in the direction you're taking, even when others are maybe paralyzed by doubt.
That makes sense.
And this confidence-backed decisiveness allows these resilient companies to lead, to actually define the path forward, rather than just passively waiting to see what happens and then trying to play catch-up.
Okay, so we've got agility spotting signals early, empowering fast action, even with ambiguity. Then decisiveness, using data and AI to find clarity in the noise and move with confidence. What's the third leg of this stool? You mentioned structural flexibility.
That's right. Pillar 3 is structural flexibility, and this applies really critically to both your talent strategy and your financial strategy.
Structural flexibility. That sounds a little counterintuitive, maybe. Resilience often makes you think of something rigid, unbreaking.
And that's the key insight, really. Rigidity breaks under pressure. Think of a skyscraper. It's designed to sway slightly in an earthquake, right? Versus, say, a brittle brick building that would just crumble.
Good analogy.
Resilient organizations are designed to bend, to flex, to reconfigure. So on the talent side, this means moving away from overly rigid hierarchies and fixed job roles. It's about having workforce models that can flex quickly, like leveraging distributed teams for specialized needs, maybe using project-based structures to quickly assemble cross-functional groups for new opportunities that pop up.
Or skills-first deployment.
Exactly, skills-first deployment models, where you can map your internal capabilities and rapidly deploy people based on the skills required by a new challenge, rather than just their department or their official title.
So being able to quickly build the right team for a specific mission, even one you didn't expect yesterday.
That's the goal. And the same principle applies financially. If all your capital is locked up in fixed long-term budgets, specific project allocations that are really hard to change, well, you lose your ability to maneuver when conditions shift, or when unforeseen opportunities or threats emerge.
You're stuck.
You're stuck. Financially resilient companies build in flexibility. They use things like scenario-based reserves. So earmarking funds not just for general emergencies, but for specific potential market shifts that they've identified through their foresight work. Or they adopt adaptive investment strategies that allow capital to be reallocated quickly based on evolving insights, not just locking it all down years in advance.
And how does linking your talent strategy back to your foresight capabilities help build this flexibility?
Oh, that's a really powerful lever. If your foresight function is giving you clear signals about the capabilities you'll need down the road, maybe, say, demand for data science talent is going to spike in 2 years because of a predicted market trend, or perhaps you'll need expertise in a new geographic region you're not in yet.
You don't wait.
You don't wait until that future arrives to start thinking about talent. You proactively align your people plans now. You start building that training program or adjusting your recruiting strategies, maybe developing partnerships. This proactive alignment of talent with future needs, that's a critical form of structural flexibility. It ensures you have the right people ready to go when those future opportunities or challenges actually materialize. You can move quickly.
Okay, so across all 3 pillars, agility, decisiveness, and structural flexibility, the common thread isn't just having resources. It's having the capacity to spot change and then reconfigure your organization quickly, confidently in response, and doing it before you're forced into a corner.
It's entirely about building that capability into the very DNA of the organization, making it a constant state of readiness, not just, a dusty contingency plan on a shelf.
Which brings us to the really big question: execution. Because, let's be honest, many companies talk about resilience, especially now, but they struggle to move from talking points to actually embedding this kind of proactive, flexible mindset into how they operate every single day. What does it take to make this shift real, tangible, operational?
It absolutely has to start with making resilience a mandatory item in your strategic planning process. Not an afterthought, not a nice to have. It needs to be baked into every major decision you make about investments, market entry, operational structure, technology adoption. You should be asking with every significant choice, okay, how does this decision make us more resilient? Or does it make us less?
So it's not just a separate initiative over here, it's a filter for all strategy.
Precisely. And crucially, it requires tearing down those internal silos. You need robust, cross-functional feedback loops. Your insights teams need to talk directly, constantly with operations. Finance needs to understand what R&D is seeing on the horizon. Marketing needs active loops with the supply chain. When a weak signal is detected or a market shift starts to happen, that information needs to flow rapidly and trigger coordinated adjustments across the entire organization, not just one department trying to cope in isolation.
Right, because the impact is usually system-wide.
Exactly. Resilience cannot live in a silo. It has to be an organizational culture, a systemic capability.
And I imagine leadership plays a huge role in creating that culture.
Oh, a critical role. Leaders absolutely set the tone. If executives convey that disruption is purely negative, an emergency situation, it just fosters a culture of fear, of resistance to change.
Yeah, people get defensive.
They do. But if leadership embraces uncertainty as normal, if they model adaptability themselves, and this is really important if they create psychological safety. Safety for teams to experiment, to learn from attempts that maybe don't work out perfectly, to pivot quickly without blame. That's when proactive resilience truly takes root and becomes embedded.
So they have to champion it, live it, and make it safe to adapt.
Yes, they need to show that adapting isn't a sign of failure. It's just part of the job now.
Okay, so it needs that executive championing, cross-functional integration, and a cultural acceptance of uncertainty and rapid learning loops. Once a company is actively working on this, how do they know if they're actually getting more resilient? I mean, how do you measure something that feels a bit abstract?
Yeah, it can feel abstract, but the old saying, you can't manage what you can't measure, definitely applies here too. While resilience itself is hard to put a single number on, you can track tangible indicators of the capabilities that build it. We look at metrics like speed to insight. How quickly can your organization process new information and actually identify its significance?
Okay. Then speed to action. How fast can you make a decision and begin implementing a response once you have that insight? And also, frequency of iteration. How often are you actually testing, learning, and refining your strategies or operations based on new data coming in?
So are you improving those speeds? Getting faster at insight, faster at action, iterating more frequently?
Exactly. If those speeds and that iteration frequency are improving over time, that's a really strong indicator that you're building your resilience muscle.
Can you give me a quick example? Like, how would you actually measure speed to insight in practice?
Sure. Think about tracking the time elapsed from when, say, a significant new market data point appears in one of your systems to when the analysis of that point is presented to the relevant decision maker in an actionable format. You literally time that process.
Okay, tracking the information flow. Right. Or tracking how quickly a customer feedback trend, maybe from social media or support calls, is identified, analyzed, and flagged for the product teams. It's about timing that flow from raw data to actionable insight at key decision points. And similarly, frequency of iteration could be tracked by maybe how often a pilot program is formally reviewed and refined based on results, or how quickly a marketing campaign adjusts its messaging based on real-time performance data.
Got it. Makes sense.
And there are other indicators too, like the quality and depth of your scenario planning. Are you regularly exploring a wide range of plausible futures, including the really disruptive ones? Or just sticking to the comfortable base case? The diversity of inputs feeding your decision-making, are you actively incorporating insights from outside your usual data sources, from different functions, from employees on the front lines who see things first?
Broadening the lens.
Yes. And how quickly are lessons learned, say, from a project in one business unit disseminated and actually applied across the rest of the organization? Are you learning systemically? These aren't lagging indicators, like how well you survived the last crisis. They are leading indicators of your proactive capacity to adapt and thrive going forward. Resilience is measurable if you focus on the underlying behaviors and capabilities that drive it.
This has been incredibly insightful. Really exploring resilience not just as survival, but as a strategic driver for growth. If there's one core piece of advice you'd offer, based on this whole deep dive, for leaders out there thinking about embedding this proactive resilience in their own organizations, what would it be?
My core advice is actually pretty simple. Design for uncertainty.
Design for uncertainty.
Yeah. Stop planning solely for stable conditions. Stop assuming disruptions are just rare exceptions to the rule. Assume the environment is always shifting. Assume major disruptions are, frankly, inevitable. And then build your systems, your teams, your financial models, your culture with that assumption baked in right from the start. Build in the flexibility, the information flows, the decision-making capacity, because you expect change, not just in case it happens someday. That fundamental shift in perspective, I think, is how resilience moves from being just a hopeful shield to becoming your primary strategy for navigating the future and actually finding growth within all that change.
Design for uncertainty. That really reframes the whole challenge, doesn't it?
It does. And kind of tied to that, maybe a secondary piece of advice would be to echo something we touched on earlier. Cultivate intense curiosity throughout the organization. Yeah. Curiosity is really the engine of early detection. Companies where people, at all levels, feel encouraged to ask why, to question assumptions, to dig into anomalies they see in the data or unexpected customer behavior. Those are the companies that spot the weak signals first. And they understand them deeply enough to actually act with intention, not just react blindly.
Designing for uncertainty and fueling that with curiosity, those are really powerful takeaways. Thank you so much for sharing these insights today.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for joining this deep dive. To you listening, we hope this conversation provided maybe some fresh perspective on how your own organization thinks about resilience. Are you designing for uncertainty? What systems or perhaps cultural shifts does this conversation maybe prompt you to consider? We genuinely love to hear your thoughts. You can reach out to us via the Descartes and Mauss website, find us easily on LinkedIn, or just send us an email. All the links are right there in the show notes. And if you found this deep dive valuable, please consider sharing it with a colleague or perhaps leaving us a rating and review. It really does help others discover these conversations. We'll be back soon with more deep dives exploring the intersection of strategy and technology. Until then, take care, stay curious, and maybe ask yourself this: if resilience is truly about thriving through uncertainty, does your current definition of success or stability actually hold you back sometimes? Keep making your next best move.